Picture this: a private aviation terminal in Seoul, South Korea. Marble floors, climate-controlled air. The kind of place where the word no simply does not exist because everyone inside it has enough money to make sure it never has to. Now picture a woman sitting in that terminal, 8 months pregnant. She flew 14 hours to get here because the man she loved and trusted and built 4 years of her life around told her the papers were ready to sign. She dressed carefully. She wanted to look composed. She wanted him to see exactly what he was choosing to walk away from. Now picture that same man walking through the door, not with a lawyer, not with an apology, not with so much as a flicker of hesitation, walking through the door with 2 security guards and another woman standing half a step behind him like she has already moved in. And then picture what happens next. He does not argue. He does not explain. He simply nods, and the guards take her by the arms and walk her, 8 months pregnant, carry-on bag in hand, right out of the building. The glass door seals behind her. She is standing on a cold tarmac in a foreign country with a dead phone, no local currency, and one hand pressed to her stomach where her daughter is moving. And then, at the far edge of that airstrip, headlights appear. Slow, unhurried, absolute. A fleet of matte black vehicles rolling in formation. And out of the lead car steps the one man in all of South Korea that nobody, not Jay, not his powerful family, not any of the lawyers or fixers or business contacts he had spent years collecting, nobody had thought to account for. The man who had just watched everything. What happens next will change everything. Because what Zara did not know in that moment, standing on cold concrete, alone, in the dark, was that the man stepping out of those black cars had a code. A personal, unbreakable, decades-old code. And Jay had just violated it in front of him without even knowing who was watching. Stay with me, because this story does not end on that tarmac. It ends 6 months later, in that same terminal, with Zara walking back through those glass doors on her own terms, her daughter strapped to her chest, her name back on everything she built, and the full weight of justice behind every step she takes. But the journey between those 2 moments, that is what you need to hear. Before we go any further, drop your location in the comments right now. Tell me where in the world you are watching this from, whether you are in Lagos or London, Seoul or Houston, Accra or Toronto, Johannesburg or Dubai. I want to know how far this story has already traveled. And if nobody has told you yet, subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications, because stories like this one are what we do here every single week. You do not want to miss what is coming. Now let us go back to that tarmac. The floor of the private terminal was marble. I remember that detail so clearly, the way it felt cold and solid beneath my feet when the security guard took my arm. I had dressed carefully that evening. I wore a deep green wrap dress that still fit over my stomach if I tied it just right, and I had done my hair properly for the first time in weeks. I wanted to look composed. I wanted Jay. That was what I called him, Jay, short for the full Korean name I had spent a year learning to pronounce correctly. I wanted him to look at me and feel the weight of what he was choosing to walk away from. I had flown 14 hours from Lagos to Seoul because his assistant called me and said the co-parenting papers were ready to be signed. Neutral ground, she said. The private terminal his family leased for business travel. Quick and clean, she said. I believed her. I was 8 months pregnant and exhausted, and I still believed, somewhere beneath all the hurt, that Jay was capable of doing one decent thing. I was sitting in the lounge area, hands folded over my stomach, breathing slowly the way my doctor had told me to manage stress, when the glass doors opened and he walked in. He was dressed like he had come from a meeting, sharp and unbothered. But it was not the clothes that stopped me. It was his face. There was no hesitation in it, no flinch when he saw my stomach. His expression was arranged into something cold and deliberate, the look of a person who has already made a decision and simply needs to begin carrying it out. Behind him, half a step back, was a woman I had never seen before. She was elegant in a pale coat, with the kind of stillness that comes from knowing exactly where you stand. She did not look at me with cruelty. She looked at me the way you look at a problem that has already been solved. "You were not supposed to come inside," Jay said. His voice was so flat it sounded like he was reading from a document. "This is a private facility." I opened my mouth. I wanted to tell him his assistant had called me, that I had flown 14 hours, that I was carrying his daughter and I deserved at least a conversation. I never got the words out. The two guards appeared from his left. They moved like they had been briefed, calm, efficient, deliberately not rough enough to cause a scene but firm enough that I had no choice. My handbag was lifted from my shoulder. My small carry-on was collected from beside my chair. I was guided, that is the polite word for what they did, toward the exit. Jay had already turned away. I was walked to the door, and then I was outside. The Seoul evening air hit my face. My bag was set on the ground beside me. The glass door sealed behind me with a soft, pressurized sound, like something closing forever. I stood on the tarmac, 8 months pregnant, no local currency, a phone at 4% battery, the city of Seoul glittering uselessly in the distance. And then at the far edge of the airstrip, headlights appeared. Slow, unhurried, a fleet of matte black vehicles rolling in formation. I did not know what they were. I only knew that someone had just watched everything. My phone died before I could call anyone. A young ground crew worker in an orange vest found me within minutes. He spoke no English, but he understood immediately that something was wrong. He guided me by the elbow toward a small staff room at the edge of the building, speaking urgently into his radio. By the time the paramedics arrived, I was sitting on a plastic chair with my shoes off and my hands shaking in my lap. They checked the baby first, heartbeat strong, position good. One of the paramedics, a woman with kind eyes, told me in careful English that my blood pressure was too high for comfort and I needed hospital monitoring. I let them take me. I did not argue. The baby was all that mattered in that moment. In the ambulance, my phone found a charger one of the crew had offered, and the screen flickered back to life. 31 missed calls from my mother, Bissy, 2 from my best friend, Kezia, and 1 text from a number I did not recognize, a Seoul area code, clean and unknown. 7 words. Don't speak to anyone. Help is coming. I stared at that message for a long time. The baby's heartbeat came through the monitor in steady pulses, entirely unbothered by the chaos her mother had just been walked through. I made her a promise in that ambulance, quiet and absolute. Nobody will ever treat you the way he just treated me, not while I am breathing. My phone buzzed again, the same number. A representative will come to the hospital in the morning. Please rest. A stranger knew where I was going. A stranger was moving faster than I could think. That should have frightened me. Instead, something settled quietly in my chest, like a door opening, just slightly in a very dark room. I looked at the Seoul skyline through the ambulance window, and I thought about how I had arrived at this exact moment. 4 years, 14 hours on a plane, 8 months of carrying a child alone in a country that was not mine, and a glass door sealed in my face by a man who had once told me I was irreplaceable. I thought about my mother's voice on those missed calls. I thought about the 31 times she had tried. I pressed my hand to my stomach. We are not done, I told my daughter. We are just starting. Her name was Director Yoon Jae-seo, and she arrived at my hospital room at exactly 8 o'clock the following morning. She knocked twice. She was perhaps 50, in a charcoal coat, carrying a slim folder, and she had the kind of stillness that made the whole room feel quieter when she entered it. She sat in the chair beside my bed and looked at me with an expression that was not quite sympathy, but something very close. The look of someone who respects what they are seeing. Chairman Park Sung-woo's convoy recording system captured everything that occurred at the terminal last night, she said. The chairman would like you to know that what happened was witnessed in full. He would also like you to know that no woman in that condition has ever been treated that way in his presence without consequence. I stared at her. Who is Chairman Park to me? I asked. She considered this carefully. Until recently, she said, his family's holding company leased terminal rights to 3 private aviation groups, one of which counted the Kwon family among its preferred clients. She paused, let that land. The lease arrangement has been reviewed. The chairman is now aware of the full picture. He does not like what he has learned. She placed a card on my bedside table. Chairman Park Sung-woo, A building address in Gangnam. No title, no list of companies, just the name. He would like to meet you when you are medically cleared, she said. There is no urgency, no pressure, but he believes you have been wronged in a way that touches his personal integrity, and he does not allow that to go unaddressed. She stood to leave. I stopped her. Director Yoon, what kind of man is he? She paused at the door, thought about it genuinely. He tends a small garden in his office, she said. He has not raised his voice at another person in over a decade. She straightened her coat. And no one who has ever underestimated him has made that mistake twice. She left. I held the card for a long time. Outside my window, Seoul was loud and rushing and completely indifferent to the quiet revolution beginning in room 308. But inside that room, the ground that Jay had pulled out from under me was beginning, slowly, carefully, to reappear. My mother arrived the next afternoon. Zara Adeyemi did not rush through airports. She swept into my hospital room at 2 o'clock with a carry-on bag, a container of pepper soup wrapped in 3 layers of foil, and the expression of a woman who had spent the entire 14-hour flight praying and was not finished yet. She held me for a long time without saying anything. Then she sat down, folded her hands, and told me the truth. 5 months ago, a lawyer had come to see her in Lagos. He presented documents, explained them in calm, reassuring language, and told her that signing would protect me from a prolonged legal dispute. He said I had already agreed in principle. He said it was a formality. My mother, who trusted lawyers in nice suits because she had spent 30 years working beside them, had signed. She had signed away the original founding documents of my company, the Lagos business registration, the seed investment records, the contracts that had her name on them as my first investor. The room went very quiet. I thought I was protecting you, she whispered. He said you knew. I looked at her hands, trembling slightly in her lap. My mother was 60 years old. She had worked her entire career to save the money she gave me to start that business. She had believed a lie wrapped in legal paper. She was not the villain. She was another victim. I reached across and covered her hands with mine. Did you keep anything? I asked. Any documents from when we started, receipts, emails, anything? She blinked. You know I keep everything, Zara. I have a whole folder at home. I always print what you send me. Something moved in my chest, sharp and certain. Good, I said. I squeezed her hands. Call that Seoul number back, the one I forwarded you last night. She looked at me with something new entering her eyes. Not just grief, something harder, something that had decided. What are we doing? She asked. I thought about Director Yoon, about the card on my bedside table. We are correcting a mistake, I said. Someone else's and ours. Director Yoon came back the following morning with 2 things. A legal notepad and a piece of information that made everything I had eaten that day turn cold in my stomach. There is a tech investment showcase happening this Friday, she said, at the Seoul Business Convention Center. Your fintech platform, specifically your microlending algorithm and the 5-year user partnership network you built across West Africa, is being presented there. I set down my cup. Under whose name? I asked. Director Yoon's expression did not change. A company called KH Digital Ventures, registered 4 months ago. The registered founder listed in the showcase program is a man named Daniel Kwon, Jay's younger brother. My mother made a sound across the room that she quickly swallowed. I thought about my algorithm. The 18 months I had spent building it from nothing, the failed versions, the late nights in my Lagos apartment, the morning it finally worked, and I had stood in my kitchen and cried because it was exactly what I had been reaching for. I thought about the 40,000 women who used my platform, women who trusted it because I had built it to serve them. And I thought about Daniel Kwon, presenting it in a glass conference room as his own creation. What does Chairman Park want to do? I asked. He has accepted an invitation to serve as a guest evaluator at the showcase, Director Yoon said. He believes your presence is important, not to create a scene, but because the truth should have a face in the room. I looked at my mother. She was already reaching for her phone. "I am calling your old business professor," she said. "The one who wrote your algorithm certification. I want his contact ready." I looked back at Director Yoon. "Tell the chairman I will be there," I said. She nodded once. He expected nothing less. Friday evening. The Seoul Business Convention Center, main hall. I arrived in a wheelchair that Director Yoon pushed herself. I wore a burnt orange blazer from my own early collection, a piece Director Yoon had quietly retrieved through a legal hold order she had arranged in 48 hours. Nobody in that room knew who I was. I was simply a heavily pregnant woman near the back, watching. Daniel Kwon was polished. I will give him that. He moved through the presentation with practiced ease, dressed in a slim gray suit, speaking in confident, technical language about user acquisition models and financial inclusion metrics. The audience was attentive. My algorithm looked impressive under the conference lighting. Then he reached the centerpiece of the presentation, the West African microlending engine. My work. 3 years of development and revision compressed into one clean slide. He described it as a proprietary system developed by KH Digital Ventures' founding team. I pressed my hand flat against my stomach and breathed. Then the side door opened. Chairman Park Sung-woo walked onto the stage, and the entire room shifted. He was older than I had imagined, silver-haired, unhurried, wearing a plain dark suit. But the room reacted to him the way rooms react to gravity. Everything tilted slightly in his direction. He studied each presentation board. He asked questions in Korean that Director Yoon translated through a small earpiece she had placed in my ear before I sat down. Then he reached my algorithm slide. He stood before it for a long time. Then he turned. His eyes moved slowly across the room until they found me at the back. He nodded once. Every head in that hall turned to follow his gaze. I stood up. My legs were steady. That surprised me. After everything, I had wondered whether I would have anything left when this moment came. I had everything. I walked from the back of that hall to the stage, one hand on a railing someone quickly provided, the other on my stomach. I was wearing a piece of work I had built. I was carrying a daughter I had chosen to protect. I was walking toward a truth that Jay and his family had spent months trying to bury. The room was absolutely silent. "I built that," I said when I reached the display. I did not yell. I did not cry. I had decided somewhere between the hospital bed and this moment that I would not perform grief for anyone. I would simply tell the truth in the plainest language available and let it do what truth does. My name is Zara Adeyemi. I am the founder and sole creator of this platform. I have the original dated development files, the Lagos business registration, 3 years of transfer records, and my professor's written certification of my algorithm's authorship. Every element on these boards was built by me. I turned to face the audience. I am happy to answer questions. Jay was in the 3rd row. I saw the exact moment he recognized me, the split second of naked shock before his face rearranged itself into fury. He stood. He took one step toward the stage. Chairman Park's men stepped into the aisle from 3 different directions. They did not touch Jay. They simply existed, large, still, perfectly positioned between him and me. Jay stopped. Daniel's presentation clicker dropped from his hand and hit the stage floor with a hollow sound that rang through the silence. In the 5th row, a young woman with a press lanyard raised her phone. She was already recording. Director Yoon appeared beside me and guided me gently back to my wheelchair. She leaned down and said very quietly, "Well done." That was all, but from her, it was everything. By the time we reached the hotel, my phone had begun to vibrate without stopping. Kezia was calling from Lagos. My university professor had already posted a public statement confirming the certification history of my algorithm, with dates. 2 of my earliest platform users, women who ran small fabric businesses in Ibadan, had been contacted by a journalist and were already sharing screenshots of their original onboarding records, which had my name on every document. By midnight, the presentation hall video had 1.8 million views. Director Yoon read me the number from her tablet, sitting in the corner of my hotel room while my mother fed me jollof rice she had somehow sourced from a Nigerian restaurant 30 minutes away. The hashtag had started without me, Who built the platform. Jay's PR team released a statement at 11 o'clock. It was 5 sentences. It used the word misunderstanding twice and said nothing specific. The internet answered with my professor's certification documents. The internet answered with the onboarding records. The internet answered with everything. He texted me the following morning, casual, almost bored. I hope you're being sensible about this. The whole thing is being misrepresented. Call me so we can sort it out like adults. It's better for the baby if we resolve this privately. I read it 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Barrister Chisom Obi, the Lagos IP lawyer my mother had retained and flown in 2 days earlier. A woman who had spent 15 years fighting exactly this kind of case, and who had the quiet, satisfied energy of someone who had been waiting for a fight this clean. Chisom read the text and looked up at me. He just put an attempted settlement offer and an implicit threat in writing on a personal phone, she said. At 8 in the morning. She set her tablet down. I want to send him a thank you card. My mother, sitting across the room with her folder of documents, made a sound that was almost a laugh. That same day, my best friend Kezia called from Lagos with what she had found. Kezia was a financial journalist, and she had spent 72 hours pulling every public filing connected to the Kwon family group and my re-registered platform. What she found was this. Jay had used my platform, its user data, its algorithm, its partnership network of 40,000 women, as the core asset in a pitch to a Singapore venture fund. The pitch deck, leaked to Kezia by a source inside the fund, listed the platform's founding team as a proprietary KH digital development unit. My name did not appear once. The funding round had closed 6 weeks ago. $41 million. Kezia said the number quietly, the way you say something when you are waiting for it to land properly. I sat with it for a long time. He didn't just take my company, I said. He sold it. I posted one photograph that evening. No caption, no statement, just a picture my mother had taken in the hospital 2 days before, me in a pale hospital gown, both hands resting on my stomach, looking directly at the camera. My face was tired. My eyes were completely clear. Just my name beneath it. By morning, it had been shared 400,000 times. The comments were in 7 languages. Women from Nigeria, women from Korea, women from the UK and Canada and Ghana and everywhere in between. Women who had been removed from something they built. Women who recognized the look in my eyes because they had worn it themselves. The hashtag had grown. Who built the platform was trending in Lagos, London, Seoul, and Toronto simultaneously. Jay's family released a longer statement. It spoke about administrative complexities in cross-border IP structuring and expressed commitment to transparent resolution. It was careful and meaningless, and the internet treated it accordingly. Kezia posted the pitch deck in full. Then something I had not expected happened. 3 of my earliest platform partners, women who ran micro-businesses in Lagos, Accra, and Kano, posted video testimonials. They held up their original partnership agreements. They showed the screen of the platform app with my name in the founding credit line that had since been quietly removed. They spoke directly to camera about what the platform had done for their businesses. One woman, a fabric seller from Kano named Hajia Mariam, looked into her phone and said simply, "This woman built something that fed my children. Say her name." That video alone reached 6 million views before the week was out. Madam Kwon called, not Jay, his mother. She did not call me directly. She called Director Yoon's office, which told me everything I needed to know about how the family still saw me, as someone to be managed through proper channels, not spoken to as an equal. The message, relayed by Director Yoon with perfect professional neutrality, was this. The family acknowledged certain documentation irregularities in the platform transfer. They were prepared to offer a comprehensive and generous settlement, including full financial compensation, a new company funded by the Kwon Group with me as CEO, and a co-parenting arrangement drafted by their legal team. In exchange, I would remove the photograph, sign a non-disclosure agreement, withdraw all filings, and agree to a public statement describing the matter as a mutually resolved business restructuring. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "Tell Madam Kwon I will see her at the IP tribunal." Director Yoon relayed this without a flicker of expression. When she came back on the line, she said, "She would like you to reconsider." "Tell her," I said, "that I have already considered, very carefully, for 4 years." Chisholm, sitting across from me with her notepad, wrote something down and underlined it twice. That same evening, a text arrived from a number I did not recognize, different from the chairman's line. It took me a moment to place the writing style. Then I understood. It was from Shin Ara, the woman who had stood behind Jay in the terminal. "The family is angry. My father has connections in the commercial courts. They are going to try to delay your IP filing. I thought you should know before they do it. I'm sorry." I sat with that for a long time. Then I forwarded it to Chisholm and to Director Yoon, and I pressed my hand to my stomach, and I said quietly to my daughter, "People will surprise you. Pay attention to who surprises you well." She came to my hotel room 3 days later. Shin Ara, alone, no styling, no jewelry. She knocked quietly, and when I checked the peephole, she was standing in the corridor in plain clothes, looking like a person who had not slept properly in a week. I opened the door. She sat on the edge of the sofa, folded her hands in her lap, the same gesture my mother made when she was about to say something difficult, and she spoke without asking for anything first. "I did not know it was stolen," she said. "He told me you were a minor investor who had signed off on a full transfer 18 months ago. He showed me documents. They looked completely real." She paused. "I asked him twice. I asked him specifically because the work was so sophisticated, far above what I could imagine a new company producing, and both times he showed me paperwork and I believed him." I watched her face. There was no performance in it, just the particular exhaustion of someone who has understood something terrible about a person they trusted. "I am not asking for your forgiveness," she continued. "I don't know if I deserve it, but I need you to know that I believed I was supporting something legitimate." She reached into her bag. "And I need you to have this." She placed a small hard drive on the coffee table. 14 months of emails between Jay and his legal team. He copied me on almost everything. I think he stopped seeing me as a separate person after a while. He trusted me so completely that he forgot to be careful. She stood. "I understand now what those emails mean. I didn't then." She walked to the door. "Shin Ara," I said. She turned. "Did he ever tell you why he needed my company so badly?" She was quiet for a long moment. "He said he owed people," she said finally. "He said the platform was the only asset big enough to buy him time." She left. I looked at the hard drive on the table. Then I picked it up. Chisholm and I read through the emails together. We started at midnight and finished just before 4 in the morning. My mother slept in the next room. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of Seoul outside the window and the occasional soft movement of my daughter inside me. The oldest email was dated 16 months ago, 3 months before Jay first told me he loved me. The subject line read, "Timeline, Platform Acquisition Strategy." He had decided before I had done anything wrong, before I had given him any reason, before there was a child or a shared life or any of the things that people use to justify betrayal. He had simply seen what I was building and decided, calmly and in writing, that he wanted it. The relationship had been managed. My move to Seoul, which I had believed was his way of choosing our future together, was listed in the emails as a Phase 1 objective. Relocate founder to Korean jurisdiction to enable corporate transfer under local regulatory framework. I had not moved for love. I had been moved. I sat with that knowledge for a long time. I did not cry. I had already done that crying in quieter moments in the early days when I first began to understand. Tonight, reading the proof laid out in clean corporate language, I felt something different. Clarity. The kind that does not shake. I opened my laptop. I composed one email. It went to the legal team of the Singapore Venture Fund, whose lead counsel's name appeared in Jay's files as a key recipient of the fraudulent pitch materials. Subject line: I am the founder of the platform you purchased. I have the documentation to prove it. I attached 6 files: the original Logos registration, the algorithm certification, 3 years of development records, the email chain I had just finished reading. I pressed send. Then I closed my laptop, went to bed, and slept better than I had in months. The Singapore Fund's legal team responded within 11 hours. Not a dismissal, not a holding response. A direct request for a full documentation package and a video call with their lead counsel within 48 hours. Chisholm took that call. I sat beside her. Their lead counsel was a woman named Ms. Clara Tan, precise, measured, and visibly furious in the controlled way that lawyers are furious when they realize they have been used. She had reviewed the original pitch materials again, she said. In light of my documentation, she had significant concerns about the basis on which the acquisition had been completed. She used the phrase, material misrepresentation, 4 times in 30 minutes. By the end of the call, Jay's accounts connected to the Singapore transaction had been flagged for review. By the following morning, they were frozen. Director Yoon called me at 7. The Kwon family's legal team contacted our office this morning, she said. The tone has changed considerably. Chisholm's second call came an hour later. Zara, she said, and her voice carried something I had not heard from her before, a kind of quiet, professional awe. The delay tactic, Shin Ara's father, it just collapsed. Explain, I said. Chairman Park kept his appointment with the Deputy Trade Minister yesterday evening, a charitable foundation dinner. He mentioned, in passing, that he had recently become aware of certain judicial processes being applied to benefit private commercial interests. He mentioned that such things attracted international investor attention of a very specific kind. Chisholm paused. The procedural delay application was withdrawn this morning. No explanation issued. I set down my fork. How does he do that? I said. Carefully, Chisholm said, and with very good timing. Jay came to the hotel on a Thursday. He did not call first. He simply arrived at the lobby and had his name sent up, the way people do when they have spent their whole lives expecting doors to open. I let him come up. I wanted to see what he would say now that the structure he had built was visibly coming apart around him. He looked diminished. The easy confidence that had always been his armor was still technically on his body, but sitting wrong, like a jacket that belonged to a slightly larger version of himself. He sat across from me and folded his hands and said that the Singapore situation was being misrepresented. He said the emails lacked context. He said my move to Seoul had been his genuine attempt to build something together, and that the legal structuring had been meant to protect both of us. I watched his face while he spoke. I looked for the man who had flown to Lagos 4 times before I said yes to him. I looked for the man who had learned to say I love you in Yoruba and meant it, or had performed meaning it so convincingly that I still was not entirely sure. I could not find him. Maybe he had never been there. There is an email from 16 months ago, I said, when he paused. The subject line is about a platform acquisition timeline. It was written 3 months before you told me you loved me. His jaw moved. You can speak to my lawyer, I said. I stood. I will show you to the door. He did not move immediately. He sat there a moment longer, and I saw it, the shift behind his eyes from calculation to something rower. He was not frightened of me. He was frightened of what was coming for him from a direction that had nothing to do with me. I held the door open. He left. I closed it, and through the peephole I watched him stand in the corridor for a long moment, take out his phone, and make a call. Director Yoon texted me 90 seconds later. He called Madam Kwon. Call lasted 6 minutes. She is convening the family legal team tonight. Good, I thought. Let them convene. Madam Kwon requested a direct meeting. No lawyers, she said, just the 2 of us. I brought my mother. Madame Kwon arrived at the hotel's private dining room exactly on time, silver-haired and immaculate in a charcoal suit. She looked at Zara Adeyemi, who was sitting straight-backed and entirely unimpressed, her folder of original documents on the table in front of her, and something shifted very slightly in the older woman's assessment. She made her offer. It was generous on the surface. Full financial restitution for lost revenue. A new company, fully funded by the Kwon Group. A co-parenting arrangement structured around the child's stability. In exchange, the Singapore filing was dropped, the emails remained private, and a joint statement described the matter as a complex cross-border business reorganization that both parties have resolved amicably. My mother spoke before I could. My daughter built something that 40,000 women depend on for their livelihoods, she said. Her voice was perfectly steady. Your son repackaged it and sold it and put another name on it. There is no number you can say in this room that makes that a private matter. Madame Kwon looked at her for a long moment. Then she looked at me. You have your mother's stubbornness, she said. Yes, I said, I do. Madame Kwon set down her tea. You understand that prolonging this is costly for everyone. It has already cost everyone, I said. Your son decided that 14 months before this meeting, not me. She left without a further offer, but I noticed, as she stood, that her hands were not entirely steady. The Kwon family was no longer dictating the pace. We were. The Singapore Fund made its announcement on a Tuesday afternoon. Professional language, carefully constructed, but clear to anyone paying attention. They were restructuring the IP attribution framework of their West African fintech acquisition following a review of founding documentation. They were committed to accurate recognition of intellectual origin and would be issuing corrections to all associated materials within 30 days. In plain language, they were putting my name back on my own company. Jay's legal team released a counter-statement 20 minutes later. It was aggressive and specific and claimed several things that Chisholm told me were going to be very difficult to defend in a tribunal setting. 3 of Jay's own lawyers reportedly disagreed with the approach. Chisholm heard this through professional channels and relayed it to me with the particular quiet satisfaction she reserved for moments when the opposition made structural errors. The PR firm that had been managing Jay's public communications sent a formal termination notice that evening. It was the second agency to end its contract with him in a week. Daniel Kwon, Jay's brother, who had delivered my work from a stage, issued a personal statement distancing himself from the IP attribution. He described himself as having presented materials provided by the company's leadership in good faith. He did not mention Jay by name. He did not need to. I watched all of it from my hotel apartment with something that was not satisfaction exactly. Satisfaction felt too warm for this. It was more like watching a building constructed on dishonest ground do precisely what dishonestly built structures eventually do. It simply fell. And underneath it, where the honest ground had always been, was my work. Still standing. Chisholm called me at 6 in the morning on a Thursday. She had been awake since 4. I could hear the focus in her voice, that specific energy she carried when something important was about to happen. The tribunal date has been confirmed, she said. 3 weeks, Seoul Commercial IP Division, full panel. Are we ready? I asked. Zara, she said, between your original Lagos documentation, the algorithm certification, your mother's records, the Singapore Fund's cooperation agreement, and Shin Ara's emails, there is not a single gap in our chain of evidence. I have been doing this work for 15 years. I have never walked into a hearing with a case this clean. She paused. But I want you to prepare yourself for Jay's team to try to make this personal. They are going to speak about the relationship, about your decision to relocate. They may suggest you were a willing participant in the restructuring. Let them, I said. You sound very calm. I have an email with a subject line dated 16 months before he said he loved me, I said. Whatever they call me in that room, I have that email. 3 days before the tribunal, something arrived that I had not asked for and had not expected. Director Yoon forwarded it to me without comment. It was a voluntary personal statement filed with the tribunal by Shin Ara. Unsolicited, her own lawyer, her own signature. It described, in precise and documented detail, everything she had personally observed of Jay's conduct across 11 months. The control, the calculated management of her as a social credential, the documents he had used to deceive her, his treatment of me. She had written it, she stated at the end, because the truth should be on record regardless of the personal cost to herself. I read it 3 times, then I sent her one message. "Thank you, I mean that completely." She replied after a long pause. "I should have seen it sooner. I'm sorry I didn't." The tribunal hearing lasted 2 days. I was present for both. I sat beside Chisholm in a room that felt too formal and too cold for what was actually being decided inside it, which was whether the work of my hands belonged to me or to the man who had taken it. Jay's legal team was skilled. They raised questions about the terms of my Seoul relocation agreement. They presented the localization document I had signed and argued it constituted a voluntary IP transfer. They spoke about the collaborative nature of the platform's regional development and suggested my role had evolved from founder to strategic contributor over time. Chisholm dismantled each argument with the calm, unhurried precision of someone who had anticipated all of it and prepared accordingly. She presented the 16-month-old email first. The room went very quiet when she read the subject line aloud. She presented my professor's certification, time-stamped and notarized. She presented 3 years of Lagos Bank records showing development expenditures in my name. She presented the Singapore Fund's cooperation statement confirming material misrepresentation in the original pitch. And then she presented Shin Ara's voluntary statement. Jay's lead lawyer objected to its inclusion. The panel overruled the objection in under 2 minutes. Jay himself did not speak during the hearing. He sat at the opposite table in a dark suit and looked at a point somewhere above my head for most of 2 days. Once, just once, he looked directly at me. I held his gaze until he looked away. The panel retired at 4 o'clock on the second day. Director Yoon was waiting outside the building when I came out. She handed me a cup of barley tea without being asked. I held it with both hands and let it warm my palms. "However it goes," she said, "you were worth standing beside." The ruling came on a Thursday morning. Director Yoon called before Chisholm did. I think she wanted to be the one to tell me. "It is in your favor," she said, "complete and unconditional." I was standing at the hotel window looking at the Seoul skyline. I heard the words, and I stood very still and let them land properly before I said anything at all. The platform was restored to my sole legal ownership across all 3 jurisdictions simultaneously. The Kwon family group issued a formal public statement of withdrawal, confirming that the IP had always belonged to me and that their involvement had been based on materially misrepresented information. The Singapore Fund issued its formal correction, updating all public records and marketing materials to reflect my name as founder. Daniel Kwon's name was removed from all associated documents. Per an agreement Chisholm had negotiated privately, Shin Ara was not publicly named in any proceedings. She had cooperated fully. She had been deceived. That felt right to me. Justice does not require witnesses to burn. The custody ruling came separately, that same afternoon. The judge's written decision noted that the emergency custody filing Jay had submitted, which had painted me as financially unstable and emotionally unfit, had been filed under conditions Jay himself had manufactured. The judge used the phrase, retaliatory in nature, and dismissed it entirely. I read the ruling 3 times. The way you read something you have been afraid to hope for, slowly checking each sentence, waiting for the part where it changes. It never changed. I set the papers down on the table and put both hands on my stomach. "We won," I told my daughter. She arrived at 5:47 in the morning, 4 weeks early, in a rush of noise and absolute certainty that she had opinions about her arrival and intended everyone to know it. My mother held my hand from the first contraction to the last and did not say a single unnecessary word, which was, I told her afterward, the greatest gift she could have given me. Kezia was on video call from Lagos, crying before anyone else in the room. Director Yoon was in the corridor outside, sitting perfectly upright with a cup of tea she was not drinking, her hands folded, her face wearing that carefully neutral expression that meant she was deeply moved and professionally committed to not showing it. My daughter was small and loud and completely sure of herself. She had my forehead, and unfairly, Jay's determined jaw, a fact my mother acknowledged with a sigh she did not voice a second time. I named her Amara Solil. Amara because it means grace that cannot be taken. Solil because she was born when the Seoul sun was just beginning to clear the hospital window, and I had decided that the city that had tried to diminish me would also be written into my daughter's name. She would carry that city in her name not as a wound but as proof that her mother had stood in it, been tested in it, and had not fallen. I held her for the first hour without speaking. I just looked at her face. She looked back at me with the focused intensity of someone encountering their most important thing for the first time. There will be people who underestimate you, I told her softly. Because of how you look, where you are from, who your mother is. Let them. Every single one of them will eventually have reason to revise their opinion. She grabbed my finger. I took that as agreement. The settlement was signed 6 weeks after Amara was born. Once Jay's legal team understood the full landscape, the tribunal ruling, the Singapore Cooperation Agreement, the regulatory review that had been opened into the original fraudulent pitch, they moved efficiently. They negotiated rather than fought, which Chisholm described as the first sensible decision Jay had made in the entire proceedings. The terms were clear and final. Full business restitution, 2 years of lost platform revenue, calculated conservatively and independently verified. Formal legal acknowledgement of my sole authorship of every element of the platform's technology and partnership network. A co-parenting agreement granting me primary custody with structured and supervised visitation, reviewed and endorsed by the same family court judge who had dismissed the retaliatory filing. Jay signed in his lawyer's office in Seoul on a Wednesday morning. I was not in the room. I was at a small table in a cafe near the hotel, Amara asleep in a cloth carrier against my chest, eating jollof rice that Director Yoon had spent 40 minutes locating from a Nigerian restaurant on the other side of the city. The rice was excellent, slightly smoky, exactly right. Chisholm sent a photograph of the signed documents through a secure message. I looked at it, saved it to a folder labeled Done, and placed my phone face down on the table. Outside the cafe window, Seoul moved past in its relentless way, cars and bicycles and people going somewhere, none of them stopping, none of them knowing that something had just ended and something else had just permanently begun at a small table near the window. I adjusted the cloth wrap around Amara's shoulders. "We are more than okay," I told her quietly. She slept through it, which I decided was exactly the right response. I met Chairman Park one final time. He poured tea himself, as he always did. Barley tea, slightly bitter warm, with a clean finish that stayed with you. He told me about an orchid on the eastern side of his office. A cymbidium variety, he said, that takes 3 years to produce its first bloom. He had been tending it since before I arrived in Seoul. He expected it to flower in spring. I asked him directly, the question I had been holding for months, why he had moved so personally for a woman he did not know. He held his cup for a moment. "Taeyong used my terminal to execute a planned removal," he said. "He did this without considering that I might be present. That tells me precisely how he conducts himself when he believes consequences are unlikely." He set his cup down. Men like that cause damage to every structure near them. Addressing it was not sentiment, it was maintenance. He paused. "But I also saw you stand up." He looked at me directly. "You were alone on a cold tarmac, 8 months pregnant, and you chose not to fall. In 40 years of business, I have learned one reliable thing about people. The ones who do not fall in that moment, those are the ones worth standing beside." He slid a card across the desk. His foundation, He explained, partnered with women-founded fintech ventures across Asia. He wanted my platform to serve as the anchor partnership for the West African expansion corridor. I picked up the card. "I'm interested," I said. He allowed himself something that was not quite a smile, but was close to it. "Good," he said. "Spring is not far." On the way out, Director Yoon handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a cymbidium orchid in a white pot, carefully labeled in the chairman's own handwriting. 3 years to its first bloom. I plan to be there for it. 3 months after the settlement, the platform relaunched under my name. The relaunch was not loud. I did not want a grand announcement or a press event. I simply updated the founding credit line, restored the original Lagos registration documents to the public record, and sent a personal message to every one of the 40,000 women who had been using the platform throughout the legal proceedings. Women who had kept using it, even when my name had been removed, because the tool itself was still working for them. The response came back in messages and videos and voice notes for 3 weeks straight. Hajia Mariam from Kano posted again, a new video, this time with her sister, who had just joined the platform. She said, "She fought and she came back. Now we grow together." That video reached 8 million views. The Singapore Fund's lead counsel, Ms. Clara Tan, reached out personally to propose a formal partnership for the Southeast Asian corridor. We scheduled the first planning call for the following month. Kezia wrote the story, a full, documented long-form piece that ran in 2 major financial publications simultaneously, one in Lagos, one in London. It traced the entire timeline from the original platform launch to the tribunal ruling. It was careful and precise and named every document. It was the kind of journalism that changes how a story is remembered. Jay made no public statement about the relaunch. His PR presence had gone almost entirely silent. The professional distance his former business associates were maintaining was visible to anyone who looked. I did not monitor it closely. I had better things to do. Amara had started smiling. Real smiles, deliberate, recognizing smiles. She smiled most reliably at her grandmother, which my mother received as her rightful due, and occasionally at Director Yoon, which no one mentioned to Director Yoon's face but everyone quietly noted. My mother stayed for 4 months. When she finally left for Lagos, she stood in the hotel doorway with Amara in her arms for a long time before she handed her back. She looked at me with the expression she reserves for moments she wants to make sure I remember. "You know what the hardest part was," she said. "Which part?" I asked. "Watching you believe in him," she said. "Watching you give everything to something and trusting that it was safe." She straightened Amara's small jacket. "But I also watched you stand up afterward, and I need you to know that second part is the one I will tell her about." She kissed Amara. She kissed my cheek. She left. I stood at the window with my daughter and watched the city for a while. I thought about what it had taken to stay standing on that tarmac. Not the weeks that followed, not the tribunal, not the settlement, just that single moment. The cold floor, the sealed glass door, the black convoy appearing at the edge of the airstrip, and the choice, made in the dark with no audience and no guarantee of anything, not to collapse. That choice had not felt brave at the time. It had felt like the only option that made any sense. But I understood now that it was the foundation of everything that had come after. Every door that had opened, every person who had stepped forward, every piece of evidence that had held, all of it had rested on that single decision made in a cold Seoul evening by a woman who was tired and scared and 8 months pregnant and chose, anyway, to remain standing. Kezia called that evening. She was coming to Seoul next month to cover the platform relaunch for the London publication. She wanted to bring her camera. I said yes. Director Yoon sent a message in the evening. "Spring is close. The orchid has a bud." I looked at the small white pot on the windowsill. It did. 6 months after the terminal, I went back. I asked Director Yoon to arrange early access before my flight. She did so without asking why. She understood. I walked through the lobby, the same marble floor, the same pressurized glass doors, the same reception desk where Jay had placed the unsigned document, and out through the side entrance onto the tarmac. I walked to the spot where my carry-on had been set on the ground, where the first cramp had started in my back, where the convoy lights had appeared at the edge of the runway. Amara was strapped to my chest in an ankara and silk wrap, the fabric combination I had sketched in my notebook the week before the terminal incident and finally had made. It seemed right to wear it today. She was looking at everything. The lights, the sound of an engine warming somewhere to the left, the cool evening air she kept turning her face into with a very serious expression. I looked down at the spot on the ground. I thought about the woman who had stood here 6 months ago. No currency, dead phone, 8 months pregnant, a sealed door behind her, a dark airstrip ahead. I thought about how that woman had pressed one hand to her stomach and chosen, in that exact moment, not to fall. I did not feel sorry for her. I felt proud of her. "Remember this place," I told Amara, though she was too young for the words and would not carry the memory. "Not because something bad happened here, but because this is where your mother decided it wasn't over." She grabbed my finger, held it. Director Yoon appeared at the entrance behind me. "They are ready for boarding, Ms. Adeyemi." I turned. I walked back through the terminal, through the lobby, past the reception desk, up the steps to the aircraft. Chisholm had sent a document for review. Kezia had already messaged about the London publication date. My mother had left a voice note I was saving for the flight. At the top of the steps, I paused, looked back at the tarmac one last time. The same concrete, the same evening light, the same city. And none of it, not one single piece of it, had the power over me that it once did. I went inside, the door closed, the engine built beneath us to a roar. And this time, I was the one leaving. Before I close, I need to sit with you for just a moment because you stayed. You made it all the way to the end of this story, and that tells me something about you. It tells me you understand that the most important thing is not whether you get pushed out. It is what you choose to do the moment after. Zara was removed from a building. She was erased from her own work. She was painted as unstable by the very man who engineered her instability. And she stood up anyway, not loudly, not dramatically, but firmly and completely, and with every document she needed to prove who she was. That is the story. That is the lesson. Your work carries your fingerprint. The people who love you will sometimes fail you through fear, not cruelty. What matters is what they do when they realize it. And the moment right after the worst thing happens, that moment belongs entirely to you. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and tell me, what was the moment in this story that hit you the hardest? Was it the terminal? The email with the 16-month-old subject line? Shin-Ara walking into that hotel room alone? Bissy sitting across the table with her folder? Tell me your honest thoughts. Your real, unfiltered review of this story. I read every single comment, and what you shared genuinely shapes what I bring to you next. And tell me where in the world you are watching this from. Whether you are in Lagos or Accra, London or Toronto, Seoul or Johannesburg, Houston or Dubai, drop your city in the comments right now. I want to know how far this story has traveled. I want to see your location. If this story moved you and you are not yet subscribed to this channel, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications. Every single week, this channel brings you stories exactly like this one. Stories about strength, about betrayal, about the quiet courage it takes to stand up when everything around you is falling. Stories with heart. Stories with truth. Stories that remind you that being pushed out of a terminal, a relationship, a company, or a life you built is never, not ever, the ending. Share this with someone who needs it today, someone going through something hard, someone who needs to be reminded that the convoy always comes for the ones who choose to stay standing. See you in the next one.